for it. I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it. Work for it, thrive for it, I'ma organize for it. Stay up in the night and in the morning, I'ma rise for it. Heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
Hey, peace. Thanks for tuning into the Money, Power, Land, Solidarity podcast. I posted a few weeks ago on the Patreon page that we were going to have independent reporter Logan Carroll on the show to talk about his investigation into Operation Safety Now. I did sit down and interview Logan, but unfortunately, it was during our super producer Isaac's trip out of town, and I'm a writer, not a producer. We had some technical difficulties during the recording, and the audio ended up being unusable. Not to worry though, Logan's working on some updates to his piece, and he agreed to come back on the show and talk to us when those updates were done. In the meantime, I wanted to talk a bit about the piece that Logan wrote, and I want to zoom in on one player in Operation Safety Now who is of particular importance to this podcast, Mr. Isaac Won. Let's start with an overview of Operation Safety Now. What is it? Starting last summer, Operation Safety Now emerged as the most visible vanguard of the right-wing conservative reaction to the powerful people's movement calling to defund the Minneapolis Police Department. Suddenly, in the summer months leading up to budget negotiations over the 2021 city budget, the name Bill Rodriguez was appearing in articles and news segments locally, regionally, and across the globe, ringing a panicked alarm about the rising crime and supposed carjacking crisis in Minneapolis. This panic appeared again in the first 30 minutes of the fall public hearing around the 2021 budget, an obviously coordinated fear fest demanding that council approve the mayor's pro-police budget. This racist law and order drumbeat and fear-mongering has continued unabated from Operation Safety Now in our local news and on local social media. On May 24th of this year, the Minnesota Reformer published Logan's investigation into Operation Safety Now. Logan did a public data request and read through hundreds and hundreds of pages of emails between city council members, the mayor, the chief of police, and Operation Safety Now operatives. Logan's piece exposed the unprecedented level of collaboration and coordination between Operation Safety Now, Chief Arredondo, and the mayor's office, with Operation Safety Now getting access to MPD records and data that city council members don't get, writing talking points for the mayor and the chief, producing media for them, and heavily influencing, damn near dictating policy ideas to Jacob Fry and to Chief Arredondo in an effort to crush the movement to defund the MPD. The Reformer piece also exposed the fact that Bill Rodriguez, the often quoted concerned Minneapolis citizen with direct access to the chief, actually lives in Richfield, a neighboring suburb, and loudly fabricated a story about a home invasion in the press to further his fear-mongering agenda. Perhaps the most scandalous revelation of the Minnesota Reformer piece is what seems like direct access and influence trading between Isaac Won of Operation Safety Now and City Councilwoman Alondra Cano. Mr. Won sits on the city's Long-Range Capital Improvement Committee. He was appointed by Mayor Jacob Fry. Operation Safety Now identified Alondra Cano as a potential swing vote, as someone who would potentially back away from her newfound interest in divestment and support Jacob Fry's aggressive MPD budget. So Operation Safety Now reached out to Councilwoman Cano to pitch their ideas, and also offered Won's position on the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee as a way to get funding for businesses in her ward. Emails show that the meeting between Won and Cano happened, and sure enough, Cano flipped her position to supporting the mayor's budget. And sure enough, Eric Won now lists himself as a consultant for the East Lake Street businesses in Cano's ward. Seems like a pretty direct form of bribery, a vote for resources, if you ask me and most of the people who read those emails. Logan Carroll's investigative reporting confirms what many paying attention already had a sense of, that a small, highly connected, deeply unrepresentative group of professionals are working in close collaboration with the mayor and chief of police to undermine democracy and prevent structural changes in policing in Minneapolis. The effort includes PR professionals who are pushing stories of crime and law and order narratives to try to drown out and undermine the cause for justice, to shift focus away from George Floyd and Dante Wright. It's worth noting that the public hearing I mentioned earlier, in which Operation Safety Now plants dominated the first 30 minutes, if you listen to the whole meeting, it revealed much deeper public support for the abolitionist people's budget that called for deep cuts to the MPD and reallocation of those funds to health and housing and other socially useful ends. Many more testifiers were in support of the people's budget than Operation Safety Now, Fry, and Arredondo's proposals. I'm really thankful for Logan's reporting because it helps us put specific names to the operatives working to defend the status quo, and the emails show us how these behind-the-scenes operations work. I really invite people to read Logan's article. He's also appeared on some local podcasts where he talks through it, and really to tune in when Logan joins us to give his update. But today I want to look deeper into Mr. Eric Won, one of Operation Safety Now's top operatives. I perked up when I saw Eric Won's name in Logan's reporting because I know Eric Won from my years of organizing around the Upper Harbor Terminal development. Eric Won worked as a community engagement consultant for First Avenue in their efforts to secure the Upper Harbor Terminal. I've been in many meetings where Won represented First Avenue along with owner and CEO Dana Frank. I can't remember if it was late 2019 or early 2020. After years of being in the same meetings and seeing Won carrying water for First Avenue, I approached him before an Upper Harbor Terminal meeting and asked him about his work with First Avenue. I shared my criticism of the development, my concerns about gentrification and displacement, and asked him to respond. Won's answer was so honest that it stunned me and really left an impression. After first letting me know that he has Ivy League credentials, Mr. Won went on to state bluntly that the housing stock in North Minneapolis was too valuable for the current residents, that it needed to be recapitalized, and in order to do that, the poor and working people who currently lived there would have to make way for newer, wealthier homebuyers. He literally told me that the current residents should be moved to the suburbs, which wouldn't be so bad with the light rail being built, and that maybe some can come back after a generation or two, but that what was most important now was to make room for new, wealthier investment. It's rare to hear someone express this ruthless market logic so plainly, so I always kept a keen interest in Eric Won. I even had plans to do an episode about his connection to the Upper Harbor, and that was before Operation Safety Now existed. So once I saw Eric Won's name show up in Logan's reporting, I knew we had to talk about it. So who is Eric Won, and what is his relationship to North Minneapolis? Eric Won was raised in Hawaii. He was educated at the University of Hawaii, at Princeton, and at Cornell University. From his Ivy League education, Mr. Won moved into the highest levels of the federal government, working for 5 different presidential administrations. He started as a budget analyst for the White House Office of Management and Budget, and he went on to work in the Executive Office of the President in an array of agencies, including the U.S. Department of Agriculture, FEMA, and as Chief Intelligence Officer for the Small Business Administration. In Eric Won's own words, I am a retired federal executive who has initiated, reviewed, and implemented long-range capital infrastructure plans for the U.S. government in areas ranging from financial management to information technology to real property and human capital. Beyond these top jobs in the Washington, D.C. power structure, his resume also lists executive-level positions in corporate America. Mr.Won says that he chose Minneapolis as his retirement community because he fell in love with a particular house in North Minneapolis, the Fournier House. This is the only home in Minneapolis that's on the National Registry of Historic Places. Eric Won moved to Minneapolis in 2018. Let's stop here and reflect. I want to compare Eric Won's experience and his relationship to North Minneapolis to that of the average North Minneapolis resident. North Minneapolis is a majority renter community. North Minneapolis is home to some of the poorest zip codes in the state of Minnesota. Home to neighborhoods that have been the sites of toxic environmental racism, where people are subjected to pollutants which cause cancer, asthma, lead poisoning, and more. North Minneapolis has been redlined, blocked from investment, plagued by unemployment. The average black renter in Minneapolis makes less than 30% of the area median income. North Minneapolis is currently right now making national news as Wall Street firms buy up entire blocks of single-family homes to rent them as deeply exploitative absentee slumlords. Now, on the other hand, we have Mr. Eric Won, an Ivy League graduate who has spent the last 3 decades in the highest levels of federal power. I looked up just one of the director-level positions that Mr. Won held, and it pays over $250,000 a year. Where Eric Won can sit back and survey the country for his dream retirement home, working-class Northsiders are lucky to ever retire, fighting to remain in their homes, working multiple jobs, or trying to stretch inadequate Social Security payments. The idea that Eric Won is a representative of North Minneapolis is preposterous and offensive. Beyond this wild chasm of experience, wealth, and access between Won and the majority of North Minneapolis residents, what's more nefarious is the way Won targeted North Minneapolis for his retirement home and then aggressively asserted himself in local issues and local politics, really an act of hostility and domination against the working poor people of North Minneapolis. Won articulated his vision for the North Side when we spoke at that Upper Harbor Terminal meeting. He values North Minneapolis for the housing stock and views the people there as an obstacle. He scoured the country for his dream home, found it, and his investment depends on him gentrifying the neighborhood around him. It's like a real-life nightmare HGTV project. Knowing Won's journey to Minneapolis and his class position explains his enthusiastic participation in Operation Safety Now. Won is one of the most active voices championing and defending the criminal, brutal Minneapolis Police Department. As we talked about in episode 50, Real Estate Troopers, the police are crucial to the property-owning class's scheme for achieving profits. We discussed how developers like the Polats have bankrolled pro-police politicians like Jacob Fry, and how gentrification brings with it police violence and murder, as in the cases of Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, and many others. Eric Won and Operation Safety Now are part and parcel of this regime of violence against poor people for the sake of real estate profits. Eric Won moved to town, bought a home, and then inserted himself to defend and bolster the MPD, which has been terrorizing North Minneapolis for generations. He loudly claims to speak for a community that he has very little in common with, because police violence keeps his property values high and helps him realize his vision of an idyllic retirement where he isn't faced with the annoyance of poor people and their problems. Now I want you to consider that this longtime federal official, this leading figure in the right-wing Operation Safety Now AstroTurf campaign, this is who First Avenue chose to be their North Side representative for the Upper Harbor Terminal project. In an interview with North News, Mr.Won says that it was Dana Frank, the owner and CEO, who personally recruited him to be their community engagement specialist. The Upper Harbor Terminal is a development that will have generational impact on thousands and thousands of Northsiders, especially the poor and working class renters and mortgage holders. But the person lifted up as the voice of the community by First Avenue and the development team is Isaac Won, who just moved here in 2018, bringing his federal wealth and privilege with him. That says a lot about the character of the Upper Harbor Terminal and who stands to benefit. I think that's where we're going to leave this little overview of Mr. Isaac Won, Operation Safety Now, and the Upper Harbor Terminal. What I want to keep focusing on is the deep interconnection between the right-wing pro-police agenda, here represented by Operation Safety Now, and the capitalist real estate agenda, here represented by the Upper Harbor Terminal. And it's the same players waging the class war against us on both of these fronts. I think we have what it takes to beat them, though. And I think we'll see a world after the police state, and a world where the land is freed from the priorities and ownership of billionaires. In that direction, onward we dance. Money, power, land, solidarity.
We need money, land, solidarity. If you funny, stand very far away from me. We have running